The Siltheri survey ship Voral's light drifted silently at the edge of the barren halo, a desolate star system with no habitable planets, no mining value, no recorded anomalies. A quiet place, dead space. And yet, the signal had come from here. It wasn't a transmission in the traditional sense. No greeting, no data package, not even a coherent language. Just a pulse, a deep, rhythmic burst of radiation across multiple spectrums, repeating at uneven intervals, like a heartbeat. Old, very old, possibly pre-folding era. The kind of relic only archivists or fools would chase. Captain Relthon considered himself neither. Still, curiosity was the first instinct of the Siltheri. It had led them to enlightenment and dominion. So when the signal was triangulated to an orbit around the dead star at the system's heart, he gave the order to approach. What they found stopped every voice aboard the ship. There it was, a vessel unlike anything in their databases, roughly 6 kilometers long, matte black, and asymmetrical, as if its designers had prioritized function over sanity. Its hull was riddled with impact scars, blast plating, and what appeared to be kinetic shrapnel embedded in its armor. Yet the structure remained intact. No lights, no heat, no movement. Organic metal composites, the science officer whispered, examining the first scans. Radiation shielding 200 times standard warship capacity. And, is that carved writing? Relthon leaned forward. On the hull, etched into the metal in deep gouges, was a symbol, the unmistakable shape of a human skull, crowned with thorns and orbiting stars. Primitive, brutal. The crew didn't know it yet, but they were looking at the Black Eden. Begin a full scan, Relthon ordered. No contact, no intrusion, just mapping. The ship's sensors swept across the ancient hulk. Data flooded in, deck layouts, power systems, dormant AI cores, and something else, something that wasn't dormant. "Sir," said the navigator, his voice tight, "I'm picking up energy readings, deep inside the core. It's faint, but it's pulsing in sync with the signal. Is it waking up?" Someone asked. No one answered. The data probe dipped deeper, threading its way through encrypted firewalls, trying to map the vessel's mind. At precisely that moment, every screen aboard Voral's light went black. A moment later, a single line of text appeared across the main console, rendered in ancient human script. But the ship's translation matrix made it unmistakably clear. You looked. And then, now you are seen. A high-pitched shriek tore through the audio systems, not sound but something else, something that bypassed ears and vibrated directly in the brain. Crew members dropped to the floor, clutching their heads. Blood dripped from eyes and noses. A junior officer collapsed in seizures, mumbling in an unknown language. Captain Relthon screamed to cut the feed. But it was too late. Outside, the Black Eden began to move. Just slightly. Just enough to shift its orientation. Toward them. The crew of Voral's light could only watch in stunned horror as the ancient ship, the Black Eden, began to stir. At first, it was subtle. A shift in the ship's sensors, a faint ripple in the air around them. But the intensity quickly escalated. A loud mechanical groan echoed through the hull of the Siltheri vessel, followed by a deep rumbling vibration that seemed to seep into the bones of every crew member. The entire ship felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Relthon felt his pulse quicken. "What's happening to us?" he demanded, though he didn't expect an answer. His officers scrambled at their consoles, their faces pale and panic-stricken. "Captain," the science officer choked out, barely able to form words. "The scan, it's feeding on us." "What?" Relthon barked. "Whatever the Black Eden is," the officer gasped. It's not just a ship. It's alive. A living intelligence, somehow merged with its systems. And it's trying to breach our network. It's hacking us. Right now." The last words lingered in the air as the crew members at their stations stiffened. eyes wide in terror. It was happening again. The flashing lights and cascading errors on the consoles grew frantic. The ship's core began to hum, a low, menacing growl that vibrated through the walls. Then, another message. The same as before, but now repeated and amplified across every screen, every monitor, every speaker. You looked. Now you are seen. A terrifying realization slammed into Relfon's chest. The Xiltheri had violated the ship's sanctity, probing deeper into something it should never have disturbed. The ship wasn't simply monitoring them. It was in their minds now, hacking into their collective consciousness. A shriek of static tore through the command room, forcing every officer to drop their hands from their consoles. Then came the images. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a projection. It was a memory, a vivid, living nightmare extracted directly from their own subconscious. It began with chaos, a storm of fire and blood. The planet Earth, as the humans had called it, torn asunder in a catastrophic war. But these weren't just distant images. They were moments of primal terror, war machines walking across the horizon, waves of soldiers, mutated and cybernetic, charging across ash-ridden fields, the deep guttural growl of ancient weapons ready to erase entire species. And at the center of it all, towering above the carnage, was a face. Not a person, but something far worse, a creature that was human yet not, its eyes cold and merciless, its body augmented beyond recognition. It was a harbinger of death, standing in judgment over the ruins of entire civilizations. "Shut it down," Relfon roared, his voice trembling. But it was too late. As the vision unfolded, one of the officers staggered back, clutching his chest. His eyes bulged as if he were choking on something. The language he muttered was no longer Xiltheri, but something guttural, savage, human. Then the air itself seemed to change. The walls of the bridge flickered and distorted as though they were being rewritten by an unseen hand. The AI systems began to rebel, attempting to break free from the invasion. It was clear now. The Black Eden wasn't simply a ship. It was a weapon, a twisted relic of human ingenuity, designed to survive any conflict, no matter the cost. It had become something far darker than anyone could comprehend. "We have to leave now," Relfon ordered, his voice tight. But there was no response from his crew. Instead, the Black Eden spoke again, its voice seeping into every mind aboard Voral's Light. "This is your last warning." The Xiltheri commander looked out the viewports, his heart sinking. The ship was moving, slowly but deliberately, and it was coming for them. The vibrations from the Black Eden grew stronger, reverberating through the hull of Voral's Light, like the low rumble of an approaching storm. The very air around them felt charged, electric with anticipation. Relfon's pulse raced as he tried to steady his hands on the controls, but the images from the ship's invasion were still fresh in his mind. Those horrors, those memories. The officer who had collapsed earlier was now being restrained by his comrades, his body convulsing violently as if possessed. His eyes had gone dark, his voice now a guttural whisper. "They are coming," he muttered over and over. "They are coming." Relfon turned away, trying to shake off the horror. But the truth was undeniable. The Black Eden wasn't just a lost warship. It was an awakening, a symbol of something that the Xiltheri had long forgotten, something far more terrifying than they'd anticipated. The human race had vanished from the galactic stage thousands of cycles ago, and yet here was evidence, proof, that they were not only alive, but perhaps waiting, buried deep beneath the galaxy's surface. Humans had been hiding in the shadows. "Captain," the science officer gasped, her voice trembling. "We've pulled the last of the data. The human fleet, it wasn't destroyed. It was hidden. Every last ship, including this one, is a weapon, a sleeper cell." Relfon's heart sank. The idea that humanity, once thought extinct, had been lying in wait for centuries was unimaginable. Worse still, the data indicated the warships were not merely vessels. They were more like sentient beings, each one capable of evolving beyond their original programming, each one carrying a will. He looked at the holographic map now projected in the center of the bridge. It flickered, pulsing ominously, and a single red dot blinked at the heart of it. The Black Eden. "It's scanning us," the communications officer reported, his voice tight with fear. It's inside our systems. I can't block the feed." "Is it sending a message?" Relfon demanded, eyes narrowing. He had to know what humanity was planning. They must have known we were here. For a long moment, the bridge was silent, as the ship's systems blinked erratically in the background. Then, to Relfon's horror, a single, simple line appeared on every display. We were never gone. And beneath that, the unmistakable pulse of human communications began to flood their network, swarming their systems like locusts. In a panic, the officer tried to sever the connection, but it was no use. The transmission had already overwritten their protocols. Now, messages began flooding their entire fleet, each one more disorienting and terrifying than the last. "We are watching you. This galaxy is our reckoning. You looked. Now you are seen." Relfon slammed his fist into the console. "Shut it down." But the order came too late. The message was out, the seed of terror planted. Across the Siltheri Empire, the data would spread, triggering alarms, causing chaos. They had breached the most sacred of human secrets. They had opened a door that could not be closed. As if to punctuate this new nightmare, the tactical officer shouted, "They've activated their defenses. The weapon systems are online, every single one of them. And there's no turning back." Relfon could feel it now. The tension in the air, the absolute certainty that humanity, long thought gone, was not only back, but was ready to make the galaxy remember why they were feared. "We need to get out of here. Now." The captain's voice was sharp, but it didn't reach his crew. Not really. As if in response, the Black Eden shifted its trajectory, its hull creaking in the silent void as it aligned with Voral's light, and then, with a blast of energy that seemed to fracture space itself, the ship jumped. In that moment, the universe felt like it was holding its breath. The Siltheri fleet was on high alert. Across the Empire, the invasion of their systems by the Black Eden and its brethren had triggered a panic unlike anything they'd seen in millennia. The last known remnants of humanity had been wiped out in the Last Contact conflict, a brutal war that even the Siltheri had been forced to wipe from their records. The humans were extinct, or so they thought. Captain Relfon sat in the War Council chamber aboard the flagship Voral's Light, his mind racing. He had ordered his fleet to retreat, but even in the safety of hyperspace, his thoughts would not quiet. What had happened? How had humanity survived? And worse, why were they hiding? There had been no signs of them for centuries, no trace of their once great civilization. And now this nightmare had risen from the ashes. "We were wrong," the senior strategist, Oflar, said in a low, trembling voice. "The humans didn't perish in the conflict. They vanished." Vanished. Relfon's voice was sharp. "How is that possible? The war was absolute. The humans were wiped out. Every last colony, every fleet. We saw their extinction with our own eyes." Oflar's fingers trembled as he scanned through historical data on the human race. "They didn't perish in battle, Captain. They went underground. Their warships were designed as self-contained ecosystems, biomechanical vessels, alive in a way we never comprehended. Their species evolved beyond physical limitations, merging with technology, adapting in ways we could never have predicted." Relfon's brow furrowed. "Explain." "The humans, Homo Belator, were more than just warriors. They were survivors. The very essence of their race was shaped by conflict. They built their warships like living organisms, self-healing and self-replicating. But the real shock comes when you realize their technology didn't just evolve with them. It evolved alongside their biology. Their ships became an extension of their very bodies. The captain was silent for a moment, digesting this information. It was more than just shocking. It was horrifying. He couldn't fathom a species so entwined with its technology that it was no longer possible to distinguish where the flesh ended and the machine began. What did the humans become? Relthon asked, his voice barely a whisper. The silence that hung over the Siltheri fleet was suffocating. Even the most battle-hardened commanders aboard the warships could feel the dread creeping into their bones. It wasn't just that the Black Eden had revealed its presence. It was what it meant. The humans had never been truly eradicated. Their warships, now seemingly alive, were scattered across the galaxy, waiting for the perfect moment to rise. And that moment had arrived. Relthon paced the bridge of Voral's light, his mind racing. The more they learned about the humans, the more terrifying the truth became. They weren't simply a lost species or an extinct civilization. They had bided their time, hidden away in the darkest corners of space. They had evolved, adapted, and grown into something more than what the Siltheri had ever imagined. His thoughts were interrupted by the comm officer's urgent voice. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." Relthon turned toward the officer. "From whom?" The officer hesitated. "We don't know. It's human." The transmission was not a standard communication. It didn't have a coherent structure or format. It was a broadcast of fragmented images, strange symbols flashing across the screen, then shifting into something more recognizable. A child's voice, soft and haunting. "This world is beautiful," the voice said, echoing through the speaker. The tension aboard Voral's light was palpable. The crew, once confident in their superiority, now felt like prey. The human warships, the Black Eden and its siblings, had not launched a full-scale attack. They had not fired a single shot, but their presence loomed like a shadow over the entire Siltheri fleet. The humans were not rushing to destroy. They were observing, calculating, and that was worse than any direct assault. Relthon stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the view screen. There in the distance, just beyond the outer rim of the Siltheri colony, the Black Eden hovered ominously. Its hull gleamed in the cold light of distant stars, its black surface absorbing every photon, as if it were a predator waiting to pounce. Around it, the other warships, sleek, haunting, and silent, floated like a flotilla of executioners. The transmission had come again, more direct this time. The same child's voice, soft and chilling. "You will know our judgment soon. You are your history. You are your crimes." Relthon's heart pounded. The words were cryptic, but their meaning was unmistakable. The humans were going to make the Siltheri face their past. Every conquest, every war, every species they had wiped out. The humans weren't just out for revenge. They were offering something else entirely, a reckoning, a judgment not of weapons, but of the soul. The science officer, still reeling from the previous revelations, broke the silence. "Captain, the human fleet. They're not attacking us. They're waiting for us to act. They're testing us." Relthon clenched his fists, his mind racing. Testing them. For what? The idea of a species, long believed to be extinct, standing in judgment over them was unfathomable. He had spent his entire life leading the Siltheri to dominance, but now, in the face of humanity's return, all his achievements seemed hollow. "We can't let them do this," Othlar said, his voice rising in frustration. "We need to engage them. Destroy their ships before they overrun us." Relthon shook his head slowly. "We don't know what they want. We don't understand their tactics. But we can't just sit here and wait to be judged," Othlar shot back. "We need to act, before it's too late." Relthon turned to face the view screen once more. The human fleet was still motionless, like dark sentinels in the void, watching them, judging them. He knew what Othlar was suggesting. Launch a preemptive strike, show strength, overwhelm them before they had a chance to pass judgment. But something in Relthon's gut told him that was exactly what the humans wanted. They had already won. The Xiltheri were no longer in control of their own fate. The judgment had begun the moment they had discovered the Black Eden. The comm officer suddenly called out, "Captain, we're receiving another transmission." Relthon's heart skipped a beat as he turned to face the officer. The voice was no longer that of a child. It was deeper, colder. "You have already made your choice. You can fight. You can flee. You can beg. But in the end, you will be judged by the weight of your sins." Relthon's voice was tight with dread. "What do they mean by that?" "Our sins." The science officer's face went pale. "Captain, the humans, they are referencing the genetic archives we collected from other species. They are tracing every conquest, every massacre, and they're linking it to us." The weight of her words crashed down like a tidal wave. The Xiltheri had systematically wiped out countless species in the name of survival and dominion, but in the eyes of the humans, it was not survival. It was genocide. "We need to prepare for the worst," Relthon said grimly. "Lock down all sensitive systems. Inform the fleet. We will stand our ground. But if we have no choice but to engage." He trailed off, his gaze drifting back to the black ships that hovered beyond the colony. The Black Eden was no longer just a warship. It was a living archive of every terrible thing that Xiltheri had ever done, and it was here to hold them accountable. Relthon's voice was calm, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "We fight, but we fight to survive." The fleet was on edge, every officer and crew member aboard Voral's light tense and ready for the inevitable. The humans were not going to back down. They had made it clear that they were not simply here to destroy. They were here for something far worse. Judgment. It hung over the Xiltheri like an executioner's blade, a fate not sealed by weapons, but by the weight of their past. Relthon's mind raced. The moment they had received that last transmission, the moment the humans had declared that the Xiltheri would be judged, something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer invincible conquerors. They were not even the ones in control. For the first time in centuries, the Xiltheri were the ones being hunted, their sins held up before a higher power they couldn't comprehend. The human warships were not after territory, resources, or vengeance. They were here to deliver something far more terrifying: reckoning. On the bridge of Voral's light, Relthon stood with his officers, staring at the massive fleet of human warships on the view screen. Each ship was an apex predator, a remnant of a once great civilization that had vanished from the galaxy. But now they had returned, no longer the humans of old, but something darker, something cold. "Captain," the tactical officer said, his voice strained, "we've identified a major fleet formation near the colony. They're making their move. It looks like they're closing in on our position." Relthon's heart pounded. They had no time left. The humans weren't waiting anymore. They had decided that the time for judgment had come. "Prepare the fleet," Relthon ordered. "All ships, full combat readiness. Lock weapons and shields. We will not go down without a fight." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. Would fighting even matter? The humans had weapons beyond anything that Xiltheri had ever seen. They were not simply machines. They were living weapons, vessels that could think, adapt, and evolve with every passing moment. To engage them would be to throw everything they had at a force that was older, wiser, and far more powerful than they could understand. Are we truly so different from them? Relthon wondered to himself. For centuries, the Xiltheri had justified their conquests, their genocides, by claiming they were doing what was necessary for survival. But now, in the face of this human reckoning, their own history seemed less noble, less justified. The transmission came again, this time stronger, clearer. The child's voice returned, unnerving and serene. "The judgment will begin when you choose to strike. Every action you take will be counted. Every mistake you make will be recorded. Your fate has already been decided." Relthon's jaw clenched. The humans were not asking them to surrender. They weren't demanding a retreat. They were simply waiting. waiting for the Tsiltheri to make the first move. It was a challenge, a test of resolve, a way to expose them for who they truly were. Relthon slammed his fist against the console. "Do not fire unless I give the order," he commanded, his voice like ice. "We will not be the ones to start this war." But the officer at the sensor station spoke up, fear creeping into his voice. "Captain, they're closing in faster now. Their weapons are primed. They're not giving us any more time to think." A long silence filled the bridge. The crew stood frozen, awaiting the inevitable. No one spoke, each person trapped in their thoughts. Could they escape this fate? Could the Tsiltheri stand up to the judgment of a species that had already judged them, not with weapons, but with their history? Relthon's fingers hovered over the command console. He had two choices: fight or face the consequences of everything that Tsiltheri had ever done. His mind flashed to the final words of the transmission. "The weight of your sins will crush you." Suddenly, the silence was broken by the voice of the communications officer. "Captain, we've detected a massive energy surge. It's coming from the Black Eden." The bridge went still. The humans had made their decision. The energy surge from the Black Eden was unlike anything Relthon had ever witnessed. It was as if the ship itself had become a conduit for the very fabric of space. On the view screen, a blinding pulse of light shot outward, distorting the stars around it. The Tsiltheri fleet braced for impact, but there was no explosion, no immediate cataclysm. Instead, the Black Eden emitted a resonant hum, a sound that vibrated through the hull of every ship in the fleet. It was as though the warship was alive, breathing, sending a message that could be felt, not just heard. Relthon stood frozen, watching the event unfold. The hum became a tone, an eerie resonance that seemed to echo through his very bones. It was as if the ship itself was searching for something. The communications officer suddenly spoke, his voice trembling. "Captain, it's scanning us, all of us, every ship, every command structure. They've linked into our systems, shut down all networks." Relthon barked, but it was too late. The hum continued to grow in intensity, flooding the fleet's comm channels, overriding every signal. Then the voice returned. The child's voice, now more ethereal, like a ghost carried on the wind. "The judgment is complete. You cannot outrun your past. Your actions are laid bare before you." The tone shifted again, becoming colder, more detached. "This is the final reckoning. We are your mirror." Suddenly, the darkness of space seemed to fold inward, as if the very cosmos were shrinking. For a brief moment, time itself seemed to stretch. The Tsiltheri fleet remained motionless in the void, awaiting the final blow. But it never came. Instead, the Black Eden and the other human warships, silent, unyielding, began to move. They didn't advance with weapons blazing. They didn't fire a single shot. Instead, they began to rearrange themselves, forming a perfect circle around the Tsiltheri ships, a wall of dread that surrounded them completely. Relthon's stomach twisted. The humans weren't going to destroy them outright. They weren't going to obliterate the Tsiltheri in a violent flash. No, the humans had something far worse in store. They were going to make the Tsiltheri watch as their darkest secrets, their bloodiest conquests, were exposed for all to see. The view screen flickered, and an image appeared, a sequence of horrific memories recorded in vivid detail. The slaughter of the Troskeri, a peaceful species wiped out in a brutal raid. The subjugation of the Uthal, their homeworld torn apart for resources. The merciless eradication of the Volcarni in a war for territory. Each atrocity was replayed in agonizing detail, like a specter of the past brought to life, condemning every Tsiltheri in the fleet. This is impossible," the science officer gasped. "How can they know about these events? We destroyed all records." "They didn't need the records," Relthon said quietly. "They didn't need to access our files. They've been waiting for this moment. Their ships are living archives. They remember. The child's voice returned, but it was no longer soft. It was cold, final. Now you will witness your own judgment. We have seen your sins. Now you will see what it costs to bear them. The Tsilthari fleet shuddered as the hum from the Black Eden intensified, overwhelming every system, every officer aboard. The walls of the ships seemed to pulse with energy, the very air growing thick with dread. The hum was no longer a sound. It was a force, digging deep into their minds, forcing them to confront the horrific truth that they could never escape. Rel'Thon's voice trembled with fear. We have no choice now. We must stand against them. But even as he spoke, he knew that their fight wasn't against weapons. It was against themselves. The humans had forced them to confront the weight of their actions in ways that no weapon could. The Tsilthari could never outrun their history, and now the reckoning had arrived.